Linny.
Hi, Nancy.
Welcome to episode 95 of the Front Porch Book Club.
The Front Porch Book Club is a podcast that meets twice a month.
We like to dig deep into the relationship between characters and the worlds they live in.
Grab your book and iced tea and join us on the front porch.
So, Linny, I think our book this month is really unlike any book we've ever reviewed on the podcast.
I would agree. The book that we're looking at this month is Life Lessons from a Parasite by John Janovy Jr. And this book is about parasites. They are these tiny little minuscule life forms that live inside of other organisms. And this is so disgusting, but they infect hosts, and we learn about that and their life and what they do. But he draws a conclusion of how we can learn about life lessons through parasites, like how they infect words, how themes are carried, how false statements are carried over, and how organisms adapt and change their environments. So there's a lot of life lessons along with this book.
Okay, so I think you've already indicated not a fan of parasites based on what you've said so far.
No.
Wondering what you remember from high school biology class. Did this book stir some old memories of that?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely stirred things up. Okay. Biology is about the worst subject that I have ever taken in my life. That and Spanish. I got a lot of D's in biology. I don't think I'm going to let John know that. That might not be a good thing because he is a professor. But I did not like biology. I remember where I sat in the front row. I remember my biology teacher had a butterfly necklace. It was dead. It was real.
Oh, I do remember she wore that. Yeah.
Every day. And I sat in the front row and we had to dissect things. We're kids. We're like 14 years old. And we're cutting this stuff up. I was not having it. And that whole area of the school smelled like formaldehyde.
It did.
The only reason I didn't get an F, Nancy, is because we had to draw, just like John does in this book. We had to draw what we were learning about. And I drew some really nice pictures. So that was why I didn't get the F. I don't think I studied, but I could label a picture and I could draw it. I'm going to tell you that the part of the book that had to do with dissecting was very challenging for me. My husband made fish last week. It was really like there's these worms in these fish eyes that he kept dissecting. This wasn't anything raw fish, with the scales or any eyes. This was the breaded, frozen stuff that you get in the supermarket that you wouldn't know is fish. That's what I was eating, and that was a challenge.
Does it just upset your stomach a little bit?
Stomach? Thoughts? Yeah.
Okay.
It's like PTSD.
So when John says he thinks everyone should become a parasitologist, not going to happen for you.
Not even close. And he sounds like a really nice person.
He is the nicest person. I do know John, and he is an absolutely wonderful, kind, lovely person. I'm so excited we're going to get to talk to him in the next episode. You'll find him delightful.
Well, I like the conclusions that he's drawing. I think of him as this man who spends an awful lot of time by himself dissecting hundreds of fish and hundreds of this and spending so much time in that lab by himself dissecting stuff. It just gave him a lot of time to think about these parasites. Seemed kind of isolating to me in some ways. Yeah, there were some other graduate students around doing this and that, but spending all that time by yourself in a lab.
At least once in every chapter, John's talking about getting together at the bar with other parasitologists and the conversations they have.
I'm thinking they're eating cheese fries when they're doing this and drinking beer. And I just can't even imagine. I'm like, oh, no. No, there's no eating and drinking involved in this activity. Oh, but they have the stomach for it.
Yeah.
So they sit around and talk about this stuff and drawing these conclusions. But Nancy, you were in AP biology, so you had to dissect worse stuff than I did.
I remember so little about biology. It's embarrassing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think we dissected a frog.
Oh, we did a worm, a starfish, a frog. She had us cutting open all sorts of stuff. It left enough impression that I thought, if I had any inkling that science would be a part of my future, it would have been a no. I sure didn't take it in college. No. I think in 8th grade, I thought maybe I might be a veterinarian. Our Girl Scout troop took a field trip to the veterinarian office. Now, that might have been a great career thing for me, and it ended up being a great career thing for me because they had us looking at an operation, Nancy, and I think my eyes started rolling up behind the back of my head. And they said, "Get her out of here." And all I remember is sitting in the outside the room, and they were using smelling salts to bring me to total consciousness.
That was the end of your veterinary career.
This is not my thing. No. And biology class just cemented that idea.
This book does focus on parasites. In the book, Janovy tells us that parasites are species that must live in or on other unrelated species to survive. Further, he says the relationship is both physical and physiological, involving parasite use of host tissues and substances such as sugars and amino acids. Furthermore, parasites cannot survive without this relationship.
And just reading that, Nancy, my stomach is flipping.
Really?
Okay, I have to get past this. It is fight or flight for me. It brings up so much stress that it's hard for me to even concentrate on this.
So I was really surprised to read that parasitism is the most common way of life among animals on Earth. Janovy says that every species that has been studied has been shown to be infected with several different kinds of worms, lice, ticks, mites, and other parasites. In this book, John discusses different parasites and how scientists have studied them and why it matters. This book to me felt kind of like a love letter to all scientists, not just biologists, and whether amateur or professional. You could just tell John loves science so much. Like, what is the evidence? How do we discover things?
Yeah, he definitely is seeking knowledge.
Yes.
I kind of get the inkling because of the graduate students that he talks about in each chapter.
Yeah.
That he likes to set that passion with other people.
Definitely.
He likes that he is flaming those interests into the next generation. And I really respect that. I like that about the book and about him.
Yeah, you can tell he's very much an educator at heart.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And he really values curiosity because throughout the book, he talks about the importance of being curious and asking questions. And I think that is something that's helpful in every realm of life.
Yeah, and I think scientists are good at that.
Mm-hmm.
They ask questions. They want to know how things are. You have to be somewhat inquisitive. Like, why is this tapeworm here?
Right.
Why would there be this in the eye of a fish? When they get some answers to the research, then they want to publish it because there are other people interested in this field of work,
Mm-hmm.
and they have those same questions and they want to answer them or build on someone else's research.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting how he said, as a parasitologist, the first question that he often asks is, what is it? Like when he finds something, he's like, what is it? But then he talks about the two other kinds of questions. So there are the how questions, and those are questions about the way things work. And he said those are actually relatively easy to answer, to figure out how things work. The questions he seems to love are the why questions. For parasitologists, this involves evolutionary history. So why did this parasite over tens of thousands or a million years evolve into this kind of a creature? Why is this a host for the creature?
Yeah, why is this a host for this stage of this creature's development? Because one thing you learn is that some of these parasites are like zygotes in one little species, and then they have to come out of that species and get into another species to emerge to a different level of development. And it is fascinating. And all these little things, all these stages are hooked up into the environment, adaptability and evolution to happen.
Yeah.
But all these things have to be in place. I think he talks about a circle at some point.
Right.
If there's a break in that, then the little thing that is hatched here doesn't go to maturity and then lay more eggs to be hatched again. I had no idea. I do know a mosquito. I didn't know they were parasites until I read this book. We are like their host because they're sucking our blood. We're laying something under us.
I somehow never really understood that malaria was a parasitic disease. Right. I knew that the mosquitoes were transmitting something, but I didn't know it was parasites.
Yeah, I didn't either.
Well, John says mosquitoes are quite beautiful.
Okay. Yeah. He can tell that to his grad students. And over the beers, maybe they would say, yeah, they are. I don't think the waitress is going to agree, though. I just don't think so.
It is interesting how complex parasites are. The one parasite that I thought was so amazing is the one that takes over ants' brains. They infect the ant and they take control of the brain and the ant's movements, and they make the little ant crawl up on a blade of grass during the day, which an ant would not do, and just wait and just hang out there because the parasite hopes that a sheep will come along and eat the grass and ingest the ant so that then the parasite will then infect the sheep. Isn't that amazing? It's like a zombie ant just sitting there.
This stuff, like, you can't make this stuff up.
No.
It's like the book of science fiction or something. But it's true.
Yes.
Then you take this a step further into psychology, which I am interested in, and say, okay, this idea transforms this little pig-brained ant and takes over enough that it changes his behavior.
Mm-hmm.
It makes him crawl to the top of the grass. And I'm assuming having to wait there a long time.
Probably.
Until sheep comes over and nibbles them. So then you draw that conclusion of what thing do we ingest? Is it a thought, an idea that comes into us that changes our behavior to the point of really killing ourselves? I mean, in the ant, he does draw that conclusion. That is the end of that ant, but because of the parasite. But you see that. You see people's ideas, their worldviews, or the false statements that they believe from news or religion or whatever that infest them and then cause erratic behavior.
There was one section of the book he was talking about as a parasitologist, understanding the difference between an individual life form and the collective species. And when he was a graduate student, he was dissecting, so many creatures. He started really understanding in a different way how different individual of those life forms were. So I'm going to quote him here. He's talking about being a grad student. That experience, building on it to form a worldview in which this difference between the individual and the species, between the one and the kind, is central to every thought I will have for the rest of my life, shaping my reaction to personal, professional, biological, and political events. My daily newsfeed focuses on kinds. Immigrants, gay people, Black people, Democrats, and Republicans, to mention a few. But my daily life deals with individuals, people with whom I do business, buying goods and services, sharing conversations, and sending emails. Those individuals rarely, if ever, match the images portrayed by some who talk constantly about kinds, often in derogatory terms. Sometimes I wonder what might happen if I could collar some state legislator, sit that person down at a microscope, pull out a drawer of museum specimens, and ask, how do thorny-headed worms of a single species differ among themselves? To answer that question, this elected official would have to spend hours, then days, sometimes turning into months, making measurements, counting hooks, drawing, then comparing anatomical features, and following up with statistical analysis. In the end, that person would never again comfortably equate kinds with individuals, or vice versa, no matter what legislation was being proposed. Never again would this person use those words so common in our political discourse, immigrants, LGBTQ, Blacks, in the same way as do their less educated colleagues who never spent that time at a microscope. It's easy to label kinds. We do it every day. It's not so easy to label individuals. When we are introduced and learn about their lives, they become real people with parents, children, spouses, jobs, feelings, and responsibilities, just like the rest of us.
Yeah, I'm glad that you read that, Nancy, because he states it so clearly. It brings to my mind that what he's saying there is true for me too. I can get caught up with some of those categorizing, saying, oh, Republicans, Democrat, all of the labels that we have. But when you meet people and you're just working with them, going to church with them, doing what needs to be done, you're not labeling people. You're dealing with people one-on-one.
Yeah.
And those labels go away and you just take the person, hopefully, for who they are and just accept them and care for them.
Mm-hmm.
What did that mean for you? That's one point of many that he makes, but you picked that out for us to think about. So it must mean something to you.
I really liked the idea that the better we understand individuals, the less likely we are to accept that they are indistinguishable from other people who share a particular trait. I love this idea of him dissecting thousands and thousands. And for him, instead of just, well, it's another mosquito, it's another fish, it's another whatever, and just seeing them as just one other of a species, he starts understanding how different each and every one is. And there's something about that care and that thoughtfulness, not just in his scientific investigation, but also in understanding the more educated we become, the wider our circle, and the more we understand people, we refuse to lump them into categories and accept other people's assessments of who they are, what they will be, and what our opinion about them should be.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that's true. I think, that goes into traveling other countries, having different experiences with different people. Like, oh, I talked to so-and-so today and I didn't realize this or that about them. And then it can cause you to pause and then maybe rethink some of those things. But it's so easy to categorize people.
Yeah.
And put them in a category. It's more work to understand, okay, as a parasitologist, the whys and the hows. How did the person get this way? How did that change them? Did it adapt them in any way? How did that create them to be who they are today, that experience?
Mm-hmm.
And that takes a different level of thinking.
Yes.
And so I think when he's saying like a higher educational level, you're looking at the whole person, not just dissecting one thing.
Right.
Not just looking for the tapeworm and pulling it out. You're getting a bigger picture of the species.
And I think it does require, it's not just open-mindedness, but it is to engage with people without prejudice. And I don't mean like the typical way that we use the term prejudice, but to engage people as unique individuals and try to prevent our brains from labeling them based on what we know about what they believe or what they look like or how they behave. And that is hard to do.
Yeah. I mean, it's easier to do that with people that you don't know the labels already.
Yes.
So that parasite guy that just cutting something open because the professor told him to. Here, dissect this. What am I looking for? A parasite. You find it, you write it down, and you find it out of this book. Yeah. Okay, I'll do that. But when you have the label first, then you have to, I think, cognitively put that aside.
Yeah.
And allow yourself to know the individual.
Yeah.
It does take some power, I think, some brain work to do that, but it also means that you're self-aware enough to know this is a trigger for me. I have a hard time with this. I have a preconceived notion about this kind of a person. Now I need to put that aside, and I need to treat this person with respect.
Right.
And really get to know them or what they're talking about or engage with them.
And it does make me think how valuable it is that we have a chance to interact with people who aren't people like us. And so that's the value of playing pickleball or tennis, or the value of loving a sports team and going to sporting events and hugging the person next to you when your team gets a touchdown.
You do that?
Yeah.
Oh, you can transfer parasites that way.
No, you can't.
Hugging people, you could get lice.
I guess you could get lice. Yeah, but the fans of my teams, they don't have lice.
Oh, okay. Preconceived notion of Nebraska people.
That's right. We don't have lice out here.
But, okay, we digress.
Or singing in the church choir, or living in a diverse neighborhood, or working at a workplace where everyone isn't exactly like you. It's those opportunities to get to know people as people that may help explode our own notions of what people in certain groups are.
Yes. And that was like the key, because then when we consider the individual, then our mind might change.
Oh, and we've become infected.
Yes! But not by a bug, a thought, or an idea.
Yeah.
So that's the beauty of it. But you have to even allow that to happen, because what I think is happening in our society, and I'm going to say part of Linda Culbertson, is that, oh no, somebody brought up politics. Everybody run for the bushes. Like, run! We can't talk about politics. We need to keep this friendly.
Right.
And people, let's not talk about, or, that's fine. I don't want to, they try to skirt around it because it becomes such an explosive issue.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be better to say, can you just tell me about how you came to that conclusion, and try to put your own thought to the side and listen, and you don't have to agree, but at least be curious like a parasitologist.
We all need t-shirts that say, be a parasitologist.
And understand the human mind.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And really, that's the part of the book that I think is selling the book. He's done very well with this book.
Yeah.
Because when else are you going to read a book about dissection?
I don't know, Linny. I think you did have a traumatic experience. I think other people may be interested in parasites as a topic in general.
Really?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Okay. I need to be infected by some of those people because I'm not currently. Okay, well, let's talk about some other parts of this book. First of all, the last chapter is really good because it lists like 30 or something themes throughout the book of what he has learned from parasites and how he puts these together with psychology and human behavior and how themes and ideas and words translate.
And they're hypotheses that he is giving to the next generation. These can be proven or disproven, and they will advance our understanding of infectivity of words.
Yeah, that is so good. We could spend time on each one of those.
Yeah.
I thought that was a real strong section because it's easy to read all of the stuff. It's a good, hefty sized book, but to have that summary at the end, I thought was excellent. Mm-hmm. So the book closes and there's general theories of infectivity, 4 of them that he really talks about. So the first one, words are infective and can alter the physiological condition of the listener.
Yeah.
So we've talked about that a little bit, but the words in and of themselves, just the words, infect others. And you see that even with slang or anything, how words cross over culture pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's right.
The second one, our words are any entity that can be identified as, represented by, or linked to a sequence of symbols, signals, and or spaces in a communication system. And then words enter and leave other words. And see, that just reminds me of the parasite. Oh. And words alter their environment, which they do.
Yeah.
And so you can ponder each one of those things. Now, words altering their environment. He does go through some things about adaptivity and change and evolution and how species are changed and modified due to the parasites of which they are the host of. Mm-hmm. So he draws these scientific conclusions to all of this stuff through the book. Of these 4, which ones do you think about, Nancy, or have you pondered?
I really like the first principle, words are infective and can alter the physiological condition of a listener. Because when I think of myself, I think of, I read an article, it changes the way that I see things. Someone tells me something, and it could be as well. I was riding back from a tennis match yesterday, and someone was telling me about a great restaurant in Omaha. So the next time I go to Omaha, I probably will go to that restaurant. That changes my behavior, just the words that person used to describe the restaurant.
Right. You're going to be that little ant.
I'm going to be the little ant. I'm going to be on top of that piece of grass.
Give me the pasta.
Right. I never really thought of words as infections before, but I love this idea of taking the science of parasitology and applying it to words.
Yeah, I think a lot about this, his statements.
Yeah.
And one of the things is the negative words and the trauma.
Yes.
And how those words infect the person to the point of them being the little ant that goes on top of the grass,
Oh, yeah.
And behaves in an erratic way because they believe certain things about themselves because their parents said that to them,
right?
Or someone important in their life, their professor or whatever. And that seed, that wound, that word then infects them. And it does change. It can change people's behavior,
right,
in a positive or a negative way, or just adapted in a different way. Mm-hmm. It can really change you. In fact, neurologists look at this stuff. Trauma can change your brain functioning. So the physiological condition of what happens with words is like across a lot of sciences, from neurology to parasitology, psychology. It's all there. And so when you see that in a little parasite, that quite honestly, they have some kind of brain functioning, but it seems like it's translucent and you know what I mean? Like it's pretty small.
Right.
But if it's there, it's also in us too, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting part of what he's thinking about.
Was there one of those 4 principles that you really thought about?
Well, I think the infection and the emphasis that words carry has been something that I've thought about before.
Yeah.
Like changing the narrative, changing the negative words that we say to ourselves is all kind of a part of psychology.
Right.
Some of the newer ideas, like this parasite's journey from this little thing to then it has to get out of that creature, and then it jumps on someone's BM, and then somebody else eats the BM and then adjusts the BM, and then it goes through this thing to survive. It's this. So when he makes that parallel, like words enter and leave other words, then you see more of the generational trauma. And you see some of the other things in psychology where things are adaptive, like my mom and dad did this, so therefore I went a different direction. I paired it this way.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't work either. And you see that sequence of events. So when I was reading a lot of this stuff, I was attaching some of what he was saying into more things that I know about to help them to make sense to me and how I view through my own lens, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Something I was thinking about not too long ago, we went to see the Wicked movie, and I was saying to a friend how fascinating it is that you think about the adaptability, the evolution of where we are now with that movie. So it starts out with Frank L. Baum's The Wizard of Oz. Maybe he was inspired by an earlier work. I don't know. But as far as I know, so we start with The Wizard of Oz. He writes that book. It becomes a movie that is, very, very popular. It's a classic. Then someone takes the idea of The Wizard of Oz and they write the book Wicked, which tells the story from a different point of view. That book did very well. Someone takes that book and turns it into a Broadway musical, which does very well. And now someone has taken the Broadway musical and adapted it to a movie. And you think that is an idea. Those are words changing form, speaking to different generations, but still having currency and impact all these years later.
Yeah, that's amazing. What is even better, I think, one of the things that I like about Wicked is that it shows Glenda. Is Glenda really the good witch?
Point of view.
Elphaba. Is she really bad? And Elphaba has a lot of trauma from the beginning. And then she believes certain things about herself and makes some choices along the way. But so does Glenda.
And then you have what's being told to the public and how what is the truth of their story is being packaged for public consumption so that people will believe certain things. So they will behave in certain ways to accomplish the goals of the people who are twisting the truth.
Yeah. And Glenda spearheads some of that.
She does.
She's in a position of power. So when she is negative towards her, the crowd is negative towards her. When she becomes friends with her, the crowd becomes friends with her. So she persuades people through her words.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you brought it up because it's a good psychology lesson as to how words have power and they can be effective.
Right.
Well, Nancy, this book has been interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you know John, but I have never met a parasitologist. If I have to introduce him, I'm going to introduce him that way. Parasitologist. It's very hard for me to say. And I'm interested in talking with him about, first of all, like how he came up with this book. Because I'm thinking, Wow, he drew a lot of conclusions from his life as a parasitologist to come up with all these conclusions about life and transmission and infection of ideas and language and culture and environment, because then the environment changes, it all goes together. So stop by the front next time and we will welcome the author of Life Lessons from a Parasite to our front porch.
That's right. Looking forward to it. Everyone, thanks for listening. Our website is frontporchbookclub.com.
Our episodes come out twice a month on the first and third Wednesday of each month.
See you next time, Linny.
Okay, see you, Nance.